Oops. Hello. I'm sorry. Good evening. Congratulations. Thank you. And we are live on YouTube now. Okay. Just click that button. Welcome everyone to the April 11th City Council meeting for the City of Philomath. Happy to be here today. First in-person City Council meeting in a long time. So welcome, it's great to see all your faces. Today we have today first we'll get started with a roll call.
Jessica Andrade.
Present.
Catherine Bisco. Here. Ruth Causey.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
David Lowe.
Here.
Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
And Chaz Jones.
I'm here. And Jessica, I think you were muted when you spoke up.
Present. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Testing.
Great, thank you. And so tonight on tonight's agenda, we have our Arbor Day Proclamation. We also have consideration of a renaming of Marys River Park, appointing a new person to the Park Advisory Board, a discussion on the Inclusivity Ad Hoc Committee, a discussion on the city manager's salary step increase, and a first reading of Ordinance number 863, granting an easement to ODOT for our downtown streetscapes project. So it's a somewhat lighter agenda than we often have, yeah. First off, we have our Arbor Day Proclamation, which is read annually at our Arbor Day event later in April. And tonight, or this month, we have it on April 29th. But this is a mayoral proclamation. We don't actually need to vote on this evening. And given that we're going to actually read it, I'm not going to read it this evening. But I just wanted to recognize that. So we have this Arbor Day Proclamation. With that, we have our visitors and petitions. And do we have anyone signed up to speak?
We do now.
Okay, wonderful. This time is intended for individuals to speak and for council to listen. Members of the council will not discuss topics or make decisions during this time, but may take comments or requests under advisement, assign topics to a future council or a standing committee agenda, or request staff to take an action. Comments about a topic scheduled for a public hearing should be given during the public hearing, not during visitors and comments. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. A 30-second warning will be provided. Speakers should provide their name and city of residence. Providing the council with a written copy of your comments prior or during the meeting is always appreciated. Those who attend public meetings are required to adhere to the council's rules and proceedings and observe the same standards of decorum as members of the council. Further, at the discretion of the presiding officer, members of the public who fail to observe these rules of procedure will be asked to discontinue speaking and will not be allowed to speak again for the remainder of the meeting. We have Robert Bisco registered to speak, and we have a microphone.
This will pick it up, Robert, if you just want to take a seat at the table, and that way you can get on
There?
camera. Yep.
Okay.
And this microphone or that microphone will pick you up just fine.
Excellent.
You can use this chair that's there already.
Oh, there is a chair.
Next to.
Oh, right here. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, specifically my name is Robert Bisco, City of Philomath. PO box, is that good enough?
Thanks.
Great. All right, the item that I'm specifically interested in speaking on is the Marys River Park name and expansion. There was a lot of community involved in a lot of outpouring of citizens for fundraising, a lot of things. It was a great example of what Philomath is about, coming together and pooling volunteers, resources, and part of that development of that park was really it was decided on kind of a group of what it's currently named. I believe if you go back into the history, it was Mary's River Park, and it might have been an event or community center, I think, is part of it. And so I think out of honoring all the volunteers and all the people that have come together to make Mary's River Park one of the favorites of the city and citizens, I think it would be great to keep it as such, to be able to honor that current name that it's at right now. So, that was all I need to speak on. Thank you so much.
I just have one clarifying question.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that it shouldn't have the natural area added to it? Is that what I'm hearing?
Natural, there was some natural areas fine, but I really want to be able to make sure that all the original, all the original efforts, it's just not, I hate to use this word, but basically without consideration of all the effort and the volunteers to be able to come in here. And so I don't know, there was floated a bunch of different names of possibilities, and I want to make sure that it stays the same or very close to what the original intent was for the park.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. So with that, we have the consent agenda. And if I could get a motion to approve. Okay.
So moved.
So I have a motion made by Councilor Lehman and seconded by Councilor Lowe. Any further discussion? Councilor Causey?
I have some corrections to the minutes of the second set of minutes.
March 14th, City Council meeting minutes?
Yes, thank you.
Did you already submit those to
I did not.
Okay. And so did you want to make those proposed, or do you want to just pull it from the agenda, consent agenda?
I'd be happy to propose them if you wish.
Sure.
Okay, the first one is on page 29. The second bullet at the top should read previously used Benton County. I don't think the word of is needed, and should be used instead of used. Under item 3 on the same page, where it refers to the staff report, easements should be plural in the third line. And finally, on the next page, under adjournment, it should read Councilor Causey adjourned the meeting at 7:30 p.m.
Got it. Does anyone have a problem with any of those corrections? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion on the table to pass the consent agenda as modified. So all in favor of passing the agenda, or passing the consent agenda, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. So great, thank you very much.
If I may, Your Honor, I'd
Please.
just like to say that I do like the new format of the minutes.
Oh yeah, I thought it went really well. It's very clean. And with that, we're going to move on to the Mary's River Park name and expansion. And Chelsea, would you like to kick off that discussion?
Yes, so this is something that you've already addressed previously. One was the Park Advisory Board's request to add a natural area to the name Mary's River Park, and you'll see the request that you saw back in November attached. When you reviewed that, you also asked the Park Advisory Board to consider whether Mary's River Park should be expanded to mitigate the property use for the water treatment plant facility. They did look at this topic at 2 different meetings. They talked about it February 10th and decided that they wanted to be able to walk the site a little bit between meetings. So came back and talked about it again at the March 10th meeting. And primarily their recommendation was to not address it at this time. There were a number of different reasons. No one was particularly against it happening. They just felt that the timing was off, that the park master plan had just been updated and done a full inventory. And so they felt like it would be adding a lot of property and potential projects and maintenance to that list right after its update. And they also wanted to recommend to the council just to wait until after that project is completed and then consider maybe looking at it again so that they could see where everything is actually going to end up. And so the primary recommendation on here, and you will see under staff recommendation that I have an incorrect recommendation, but it's to approve the modification of the name Marys River Park to include a natural area.
I think I don't know if the audio is cutting out on my end or your end, but all I know is the last time we had a hybrid meeting that there was audio problems then too. There you go. I can start to hear the
So now can you
mic
hear?
sound. Yes.
And does it sound choppy at all, or is it okay?
No, it sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Looks like there was a technical issue briefly.
Okay, so I was finished, but if there are questions or if Jessica didn't hear the end of what I said, let me know.
Yeah, Councilor Andrade, did you hear everything, or did she need to repeat anything that you're aware of?
Well, I don't know if I heard everything, but the basically not wanting to recommend to city council to expand because of different factors. That's all I heard. That's where I last heard. Was there
Yeah.
anything important after that?
Right, and it wasn't at this time. It was more of they were requesting to table the conversation, not that they didn't think that it was a valid conversation to have. They just felt that the timing of it, they would rather wait until the construction is substantially completed so that the effects of it, or what parking areas might be taken up, or they wanted to see everything before they could make a recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have one quick question about that.
Yes.
And that was recommended by the majority of the Park Advisory Board.
Yes, they unanimously voted for that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments, or do we have a motion? Go ahead.
I move to modify the name of Marys River Park to Marys River Park and Natural Area.
Excellent. I'll second that. So Councilor Causey made the motion and I seconded that motion. Any further discussion on that? Councilor Biscoff.
So we're proposing then to not wait based on the recommendations by the Park Advisory Board, right? That's what I'm hearing, the motion.
I think that the clarify if I'm wrong, Park Advisory Board voted to table the expansion of the park, not the change of the name.
That's
Right?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are,
To the point of the naming of the park, do we feel that since this is owned by everybody in Willamette, that we've actually gotten adequate feedback from the public on whether or not they like the idea of naming the park, or is this not going to include that conversation with the public?
that's a great question. It's been on the agenda twice. Did we get any, I don't remember us getting any public feedback except for the people on the Park Advisory Board.
That's correct.
Last meeting.
And Chris might be able to interject a little of how this has been handled in the past. I don't have a history on that,
That's
but I believe this form has been filled out in the past and brought to the city council. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, the form we're using, I mean, it varies, right? On a new park, that's gone out survey format to get recommendations from the general public. But we've also had specific buildings or structures or other things that have been named just by way of this form, which is filled out by an organization. I think the Kugler Shelter, for example, the Lions Club submitted that. It came to the council. There was a vote. I don't think that even went to the park board. So it just depends on the situation. If the council feels like we should float this out to the public, we can do that. I don't know if there's anything time sensitive here, but if you're comfortable with having, just going off the advice of the recommendation from the park board, we can do that as well.
So, and then a question from, so essentially any one individual could submit this form to rename something.
It says organization, so typically it's coming from a nonprofit or some type of entity of some sort, yeah.
Got it. Councilor Biscoe?
So I know that in the past, Corvallis has actually solicited naming suggestions in name changes like this, but also, is there any reason we don't have a time deadline that we couldn't put, at a minimum, at least put this in our newsletter and ask the public for their opinion?
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah,
no reason we
I think
couldn't.
that's reasonable. If that's something that the council wants to do, we can do that.
And I definitely don't feel strongly about it. I feel bad that we had it on the agenda, then I asked them to postpone the conversation just until I reached out to the tribes, and I did that, we got back. But that's the only thing, is that I feel like we're kind of putting them off on the decision, but yeah, Councilor Lowe?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember back to when this first came up as renaming. So it seems like it's been identified in various meetings. Do you recall the first time that we talked about possibly changing the name?
Well, I know that the Park Advisory Board brought this to you in November, but they had talked about it, discussed it before that at Park Advisory Board meetings.
Yeah, okay.
So
And
it
those are,
has been talked about at several public meetings.
okay, so numerous public meetings where these things are all recorded. And did we not, so no one piped up or said anything
I
about,
haven't heard
don't
any feedback
change the
from
name?
you.
No, I have not.
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wonder, I mean, I don't disagree that we put it out there, but I don't know, to me, it seems like things that have been in the public forum for a long time, if someone has a strong interest in expressing how they feel, they would bring that to us.
Yeah.
My thought.
Councilor Biscoe?
We didn't ask.
Yep.
We just proposed. So even in all those public meetings, we didn't actually solicit feedback. We didn't ask for opinions on whether or not somebody would approve that or would wish to approve it or propose other recommendations. So I guess I'm strongly saying I think we should involve the public in a decision that will impact them and their purpose.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing real
Please.
quick? Is that the change of the name is just the adding of natural area, which is more descriptive than changing, correct?
Yeah.
Like if we were to name it Lehman Park, that would indicate more of a name change, whereas and a natural area is a descriptive words that are kind of solidifying what that park, for those that are looking for a park, it identifies Mary's River Park as simply not only a park, but a natural area. So I think, in my opinion, would be that, is it a true name change? No, it's just an addition and a descriptive of that park rather than specifically a name change that we need to have public input for.
There was also some concern about that being very closely named to a park in Corvallis. Chelsea, maybe you remember that, or there's another Mary's River natural area or something like that in Corvallis that was brought up in some of this public engagement at some point, and that there might be some confusion between the two.
I'm not aware
Similarly,
of
okay,
that
similarly
part,
named.
but we could definitely look at it.
Yeah, would you please?
Yeah. And yeah, so
Mhm. Yeah, it does look like Corvallis has Mary's River Natural Area, which is out off of Brook Lane.
got it. Councilor Causey?
I'm just wondering, I see in this week's newsletter that the Park Advisory Board agenda items are included. Has this not appeared in previous newsletters?
Well, we've included the minutes. I know the minutes are actually at the back of your second part of your packet. The very back shows their discussion at that particular meeting. And yes, we do put the descriptors of what's happening in the meeting. It has been listed in the newsletter when they were talking about it, or when it was, anytime that it was coming up at a meeting, yes.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, those descriptions in the newsletter aren't always complete because we're kind
It's
of
true.
making a stretch at the beginning of the month of what's going to be on an agenda 2 to 3 weeks away.
Right.
But we do our best, right?
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? So all in favor of renaming the park as described here, please raise your hand. Oh, renaming the park to Mary's River Park and Natural Area. Please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. All abstentions? Counselor, so we have, so motion carries 5 to 1 to 1 with 1 abstention. So next on the agenda is the Park Advisory Board appointment. And I'll just mention that on this thing, the mayor makes a recommendation to the council, and then you can approve that. But I was just going to mention that on this, I basically just reviewed each of the applicants and determined that they were all well qualified. They all, there was no reason to pick one over the other, and so I just picked one at random, not wanting to think that one was more highly qualified than the other. And with that, I ended up choosing the name Larry Sleeman. And so that's just the approach, and I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. I didn't feel like I could judge or should judge those different applicants. So yeah, so with that, I was recommending the appointment of Larry Sleeman to the Park Advisory Board for the period of April 11th of 2021 until December 31st of 2024. Councilor Lowe?
Yeah, I appreciate your explanation, Mayor, why Mr. Sleeman was, can you hear me all right through this thing? We're just closer than I thought we'd be, and I'm not so sure. Anyway, so I appreciate your explanation, Mr. Sleeman. But I noticed that we only have Mr. Sleeman's information here and not the others. So in order to kind of just understand what the others brought to the table, can you give us a little background on that?
Sure, I can attempt to. Can you just? Yeah. And so I will just start off memory here while I open up these things. But Margie Brown has been seems like a long-term volunteer to the city. I think many of us are familiar with who she is, at least. She's gone through the Philomath Citizens Academy, has volunteered on numerous city committees. I believe the budget committee is the one that I was most familiar with her time on. very interested in the parks and is a long-term resident. It's basically a summary. And then we had Jackie Weiner, who was retired Park Service employee. I believe she was worked at Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Parks. So she had a strong background in the environment and park system. She's relatively new to the area, but yeah, has a passion for the outdoors. And then we had, that's a continuation. And then we had Chris Althaus, who is a passionate outdoors enthusiast, a mountain biker, if I remember correctly, volunteered on a lot of trail building teams, seemed like a person who took action on a lot of different things and moved things forward. Was a volunteer, not necessarily on committees and stuff, but on outdoor activities and pushing things forward. And then we have Mr. Sleeman, who used to volunteer with the city a lot. I guess he's been here for 35 or 40 years. And oh yeah, was on the, there it is, was on the Philomath 2000 committee, the Philomath Fire and Rescue Board of Directors, and with his volunteer with his church, and is active, has an active interest in parks and outdoor recreation in the community. So he's lived in Philomath for 45 years. So, you know, they're all extremely well qualified, and I just picked them at random.
And just a follow-up question. So the people that aren't selected, do we do any sort of encouraging, like, okay, we have other committees, we have our other volunteer opportunities, we try to make make that known to them? And
Oh yeah, they start getting junk mail and spam. And
Sign up for all the.
yeah, we do keep, you know, kind of an unofficial list. I mean, we have a formal list, but we keep track of people that are interested, that continue to show interest, and look for opportunities for them to become involved, whether it be events coming up. Yeah, there's some specific things we've reached out to them already of some community events happening, or, you know, frolic stuff or anything. I was trying to find other opportunities for them to be involved, but it's difficult. I mean, it's a tough situation. You have 4 great people that want to help out and you got 1 position.
Right.
So we do try to let them know of their opportunities where they're available. And then obviously when there's other openings in the city, we will often send them a courtesy email, let them know that another position's opened up and encourage them to apply. In the past, sometimes that's hurt us because we encourage them to apply and then they don't get selected again. Or that's kind of tough, difficult. So we're a little bit careful. You know, we just say, hey, just, you know, trying to be cautious of that, but at the same time, make sure that they know that they're appreciated.
Yeah, I hate to even look at and see 4 well-qualified people and then say, well, we have to pick 1. So that's why I just wanted to do it at random. I just, and I hope that you convey that information to the others if they're not selected. So, but with that, we have a motion, a recommended motion. Councilor Causey.
I move to confirm the mayor's appointment to the Park Advisory Board as presented.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion made by Councilor Causey and seconded by Councilor Nielsen. Any further discussion? Councilor Biscoe?
Robert just pointed out that the date is actually 2021 on this document.
Oh yeah, actually I was, wait, on which document?
Your agenda item summary, it shows
Oh,
Mayor Jones.
April 11th, 2022. Yeah. So that'll be corrected. And so all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. I really appreciate having people interested in working with the city and volunteering their time. It's incredibly generous. So thank you.
Can I go back a little bit? Was the concern about the date for the appointment?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, that is the term. And so he's going to be fulfilling the remainder of this term that was vacated early. So that term is correct. It is April 2021 through December 31st, 2024.
And why is that term correct? That's not a normal term.
Because Izzy left her,
But she didn't start on April 11th, 2021, right?
I don't know, I would assume so.
I'll just confirm the dates, whichever they are, make sure that we
Fix it.
update that and fix it. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it should be the term January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2024. It's a 3-year term.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
it should be April, or it should be January instead of April, but years, right? Sorry about that.
And then next on the agenda is a discussion of the city manager's salary step increase. And I noted that there was a typo under background, under the initial, oh, I did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go back to a conversation about the Inclusivity Committee. Sorry, it looks like an email, I just skipped over it. I'm gonna let Councilor Lowe speak to this agenda item.
Thank you. Councilor Andrade, can you hear me okay? Okay, I want to be sure. The main thing I want to make known is that I really support the efforts of the Inclusivity Committee. I think it's a very valuable committee, and I think it's important that the city has undertaken it and supported it and continues to support it. And Councilor Andrade, I thank you for taking a leadership role in helping to move things along. I really appreciate that. And I did listen to the last meeting that you had, watched the video, and I know towards the end, Councilor Nielsen brought up this email that I had. And what I was glad to hear that you had already thought about putting out a survey to your members or to the Inclusivity members to find out just, I guess, yeah, taking the pulse, finding out how everybody feels about how things have progressed since the committee was formed, ideas and suggestions. And I think that's really good. And I think that the email that I created isn't something that necessarily has to be decided tonight or anything. And I think in light of what the committee talked about and what you talked about at the end of last Inclusivity Committee meeting, it makes a lot of sense to find out what the members are thinking and then your thoughts on this. You had alluded to the discussion tonight. My feeling now is it would be premature to have the committee do anything different. I mean, have city council take any action that's different than what's happening right now. But I think it'd be very good for the council to have the results of your survey and have an idea of what the committee members are wanting. My concern has been that when I think of the committee and the needs of it, the structure and just how people need to feel safe and secure, and maybe people not always being able to or wanting to attend a particular meeting, that's kind of sort of grounded in what inclusivity is. It's not being forced to have to show up at something if you don't feel that that's the right moment for you to be there or so on. And yet the public meeting part of it kind of has more conditions and rules attached than if I were there, I would feel, well, I'm kind of constrained, or I might not feel safe in saying something in this big, broad environment. And that's where I was coming from when I was proposing this. So I guess I just like to say that I think it's still something important that we as a council should look at to see what is in the best interest of the committee, but I think we really need to hear back from you in the committee as to what the feelings of the membership are. And so that's where I am at this point with it.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I think it's really important. I wanted to also hear from the committee members, probably at our next Inclusivity Committee meeting, about their feedback on this. I think that's important. So I'm happy to hear that that's what you're thinking too.
So I don't propose any action at this time. I think it's good to have the conversation, and we're going to learn more.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add on this or questions for Councilor Lowe at this time? Councilor Bisco, or I'm sorry, Councilor Kazi.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge Councilor Andrade's leadership efforts with the committee. I know it's quite a diverse group of individuals, and I think you put in a tremendous effort in guiding them. And I also wanted to acknowledge the thoughtfulness of Councilor Lowe's email in taking some of the challenges into consideration.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Councilor Andrade?
Thank you for your kind words. And yes, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your email, Counselor Lowe. I will say, though, that there are several things that aren't necessarily true. They're kind of assumptions. And I don't know how to, like, if you want me to talk about them now or, you know, write a memo for next meeting or something, or we can just forget about it until you get the survey results.
Seems like it'd be good to discuss that in the Inclusivity Committee meetings. You know, I think that these are more assumptions rather than accurate assessments, but I think that's fine. You can even write that up into your notes to the Inclusivity Committee when you submit that. It's kind of up to you, but.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on this topic, or should we table it until we hear back from the Inclusivity Committee?
Right, I think we should table, I recommend that.
Okay, so no action needed is what I'm. Great. Next on the agenda is the discussion of the city manager's salary step increase. And I was wanted to make a note that under background, the typo it says in 2021, the council directed staff, but that was actually in 2020. I believe it was December of 2020. But it was in 2020, so it was not this actual council. But Chelsea, do you want to take the lead on this discussion?
Yes. So in 2020, council directed a salary survey to ensure that the city was at a 75% point of comparable cities for salaries. And there were several positions, I wasn't here at the time, but that needed to be adjusted to get to that level. The city manager salary was one of those. And so after that was completed, the city manager was moved up to step 6, and I did give you an additional handout for the July 1st, 2021. That's currently shows the step 6 where the city manager is, and then you'll see the COLA adjustment when you move down to the July 1st, 2022. And the intention was that the 2 steps would be made over several years to make the adjustment in a slower manner rather than all at once for the positions that were a little behind. And so I don't have a formal recommendation, but this is asking to allow the city manager to be moved to a step 7 effective July 1st, 2022, which will include the 3% COLA that's been approved. And you can see that under step 7 on the bottom section.
So a clarifying question. The salary at this point in time is the upper July 1, 2021, step 6
Correct.
of $10,010. And then the modified as of July 1, it would be $10,722.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. With that, we have a recommended motion, or we can go into a discussion. Councilor Kazi.
I move to approve the city manager's salary being increased from step 6 to step 7 of the current salary schedule, effective July 1, 2020.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilor Kazi and seconded by Councilor Lowe. Any further discussion? Councilor Biscoe.
So the salary, quote, salary survey was requested in December of 2020. I didn't see any results of that salary survey. Was that something that we did not see?
This wasn't a salary survey.
Also, it was just stated as a salary survey.
Okay, a comparison of salaries. But I think that the important, well, I guess what I was reading from that was that it was in 2020 that we did do the comparison, but we also did we directed it to be a 75% point of comparable. That's right. So sorry. Yes, we did do a survey. We did.
Right, several of the positions. Chris could probably speak to which position specifically. I believe it was police, some police positions here in City Hall.
I'm sorry, can you get a little closer to the speaker?
Yes,
Or
sorry,
speak
I
louder.
can speak louder, sorry. I was just saying that the positions that were looked at the time for comparison were the police positions at City Hall, I believe Public Works positions as well. So it wasn't a full external salary survey like you've asked to be done next fiscal year. But it was asked by the council to do a comparison with cities that are of similar size.
Right.
So my understanding is that was only union. I didn't know that, I didn't see the results of this salary comparison or otherwise. My only concern is, and just want to place it here, is we've been asking for a full comprehensive salary survey done by an external, not an internal individual. And we don't have that. With that, there's no way for us to realistically know, because as the state requires, it's not only just a salary comparison, but it's also goes to the responsibilities of the position and the comparisons of equitable position and responsibilities besides just a flat salary. So I'm hesitant to just say, yes, let's just make this decision. We have no data.
Yeah.
Can I have a comment for that, Chaz? So this is our current adopted salary schedule that we use. So I don't think it's a question on whether we're approving the salary schedule. This is what we use for our staff. It's really just a matter of giving him a merit increase based off of his positive performance evaluation. And that's really the question. And that, yes, we are intending to do a full salary survey with an external company as the council requested next fiscal year. So until then, this is our salary schedule that we use for our employees.
Yeah, yeah, that's being put into the budget for next year. Yeah.
Can I just point out that the information from the 2020 salary reviews that was completed is in the March 24th, 2020 Finance and Administration Committee agenda packet, which is posted online.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that, but it did not come to the council, correct? It was actually embedded in the finance and admin.
I don't know if it went beyond, I don't know if it was shared with the council or not, but Councilor Causey?
I was just going to say that I remember seeing that information. I don't know if it was given to the budget committee at the time.
I can't recall, but I do know that it was posted online.
Yeah.
When the meeting occurred.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, so, and Councilor Andrade, you had a question?
Yeah, where are the pay schedules? Where on the website? Because I have tried to find them and I haven't been able to.
I don't believe they're currently on the website. We're definitely updating. I have a lot on my list of things to do. It's one of the things to do is to get these up on the website. Maybe our, job descriptions of things that are more accessible. But it is here, and like Ruth said, it has been in a public packet. So at any time, anyone can ask for a copy of it. They can contact me and I'll be happy to give a copy of it.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear. Although I will say that how are we to know that the schedule's in there if we don't have time to read the packet, like that part of the packet before the meeting? So I just wanted to point that out as being a potential issue.
Thank you. And I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I'm not sure if it made it or not into the COLA discussion as well. It may have also been in with some of those materials as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just clarifying, I might have read it down wrong. So Ruth, did you say March 24, 2021? Actually wrote 2020. So this council has not been responsible for that packet information. Okay. I didn't write it down correctly. Thank you. If I might make one other comment, the positive annual performance appraisal is a subjective statement here. I know there were some concerns that won't be discussed here. I don't know how to reconcile that statement, being that that discussion was held in an executive session.
Yeah, the positive, the results of this performance evaluation that was released publicly was positive.
But not unanimous.
And not unanimous, but yet positive. So, and the council as a whole moved forward and voted to approve that recommendation. So, yeah, so there was definitely a positive performance evaluation was the end result.
And that statement was based off of the press release that
Correct.
went out.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, any further discussion? All in favor of passing the motion as stated, and I'll just reread it, to approve the city manager's salary be increased from step 6 to step 7 of the current salary schedule effective July 1 of 2022. So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Great, thank you for that. Next on the agenda is a first reading of ordinance number 863. And I believe that, Jim, you get to do the honors.
I will read the ordinance. This is an ordinance granting 2 temporary and 1 permanent easements to the Oregon Department of Transportation in connection to the Philomath Downtown Safety and Improvements Project and declaring an emergency.
Excellent. Let's see, staff, you want to?
Yeah, I can speak just briefly. Hopefully y'all recall Mr. DeBell, Sam DeBell, he's the one that presented on the bioswale area off of 9th Street. So he's been working with the ODOT right-of-way coordinator. And so I reached out to him on the specific questions that Councilor Bisco had brought up at the last meeting on why these need to be permanent. Information that's good in the memo. There's some irrigation infrastructure that's going to be put in place. There's not room in the current right of way to have that there. And so working with Public Works, they decided to go ahead and ask for that to be a permanent since that's going to have ODOT infrastructure in there. And talked to him about the tree, and he looked back and looked at the map, and just again with this project, there's no reason for that tree to ever be removed. ODOT currently has the right to trim any tree that's hanging out over into the right of way. So technically where that tree were hanging into the right of way, if they felt they needed to trim it back, they could today. If they could trim back into the easement, this would give them an extra 2 feet or 3 foot, whatever with the easement is, they could trim that tree back that much further. But as far as cutting the tree down, there's no need for that.
Wonderful. So any questions for staff on this item? Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, the emergency portion of this, understanding that ODOT wants to get this checked off their list, just wondering, honestly, is there going to be any impact to moving forward if we don't grant the emergency status? They're not going to be moving equipment or digging anything for 7 or 8 more months, right?
They are, that's correct. They are in a process of trying to wrap up all of the easements so that they can get that box checked and get submittal. I'm not going to pretend that I know all of the different checkpoints that ODOT has to meet before they're ready to go out for bid, but this is a major impediment right now and keeping them from going to their next step in their bid preparation. So an emergency clause is appropriate, and that it is going to allow them to get all of these temporary right-of-way easements and permanent easements in place so they can move forward towards getting this out to bid. If I felt it was necessary, I don't just put emergency clauses on ordinances. I don't think I have done that in the 8 years I've been here, but it felt like it was warranted in this case. And the disadvantage of the emergency clause is that it can't go through the initiative process and be challenged as easily. And again, for a temporary easement and a permanent easement along City Hall, I don't feel like we're taking very much away from the citizens as far as the initiative process. So
it's a 30-day difference
right.
in when it's effective.
And the emergency clause only affects these easements, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And Jim, do you know if it's normal for communities to kind of make these kind of emergency clauses to things like this?
It's not unusual. I will say that the state legislature often uses emergency clauses simply to prevent any public discussion of legislation. It's not unusual for places to pass, I think every city that I've worked for, except for maybe Philomath, has done emergency clauses from time to time because it's necessary in order to get funding for a project. It's necessary for, there's some other event that's happening that requires the ordinance to be enacted sooner. Often it's a deadline set by the state that if you don't have a local ordinance in place by this date, then you have to follow these rules instead.
Mhm. And if this is not a unanimous roll call vote, then it will come back to us in the next council meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. Councilor Lowe?
So we're saying it's emergency now. If, had this all gone through the time frame that it was initially presented, would we still be looking at an emergency?
Yeah, if ODOT was only waiting on this easement, I would say it's probably not a big deal. But the fact is, they still have a lot of outstanding easements. So I'm trying to be, I don't want to be the city to be the last easement that finally gets resolved so that they can turn the page and move forward. I'd like to be 5th to last or 10th to last or somewhere there. So yeah, had this been brought up 5 months ago, we probably could have done without emergency clause, but the fact is we've just bumped out our bid date by 2 months. And, we are kind of in this time crunch era where, again, I felt it was appropriate to speed things up and try to be a little bit more efficient with our time and getting a resolve back. As if this gets approved unanimously tonight, I can sign these tomorrow and get them to ODOT tomorrow and get it off of my list of things to do, get it off ODOT's list of things to do, and we can move forward. If it's not unanimous, or if we don't do the emergency clause, then we're going to be out another month or month and a half, depending on how many times it needs to come back before the council. So, but again, I want the council to feel comfortable with it. I'm just explaining that was the reason for the emergency clause, was if everybody's in favor and we're comfortable with it and we get it unanimous, I can sign documents tomorrow and get this checked off.
I will say that I asked the city manager why we weren't doing this by resolution instead of ordinance. That once the easements are entered into, they're easements. And I think his comfort level was higher on the permanent easement in particular, with having the council do that by ordinance rather than resolution.
Yeah. Makes sense. And Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and I'm really trying hard not to sound petulant here, but the state does this all the time. They use the emergency clause specifically to limit debate and specifically to limit the ability for the citizens to appeal their legislation. That's 99% of the reason they do it. This project has been on the books and been talked about for at least 3 years. And we've been in continuous negotiations with ODOT the whole time. The fact that they're essentially requesting us to do this, or not, if they're not requesting us to do it, they're implying that we don't want to have any more delays that were caused by them most of the time to begin with, but you might be holding us up, is a shallow excuse for circumventing the natural process of doing something like this. And I'm just going to tell everybody, I'm going to vote no on this, specifically because of the emergency clause. So we can either take that out and theoretically vote unanimously, or we can leave it in and we can wait the extra month anyway. And that'll give citizens an opportunity to come and talk to us about it if they don't agree with the easements, which should naturally occur.
And if we remove the emergency clause, pass it tonight, if it gets passed tonight, then it would come back to us a month from now, because we have to put it out for a public hearing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
No, if it's unanimous tonight without the emergency clause, then it would be effective 30 days from tomorrow.
Oh, got it.
The city manager simply couldn't act on it until then.
Got it.
But you'd need a motion to amend the ordinance.
Yep. Wait 1 second. Sorry, Chris?
I just to respond to Counselor Lehman, and I try to be fair. If I implied that ODOT asked for the emergency clause, and that was my error, the emergency clause came from me, it didn't come from ODOT. I just know that ODOT this is one of the things that has taken longer for ODOT to get done than what they had anticipated. Not necessarily because it's taking them longer, but because there's just a lot more of them than what the project originally anticipated. So the time frame set out, this is a longer explanation, maybe it's warranted. The time frame originally set out by Murray Smith didn't take into account the sheer number of temporary easements that ODOT was going to require every time an ODOT contracted employee takes step off of ODOT right away onto private property, that temporary easement is required. And so that means every property owner on Main Street, Applegate Street, both sides of the street, it's just been a volume issue. So it's not been by lack of starting earlier or effort. It's just been the time frame for them to get this done wasn't sufficient for the number of them that they've had to get. So the urgency is strictly coming from me and trying to help the project move along. It's not coming from ODOT's request. I don't think they don't necessarily cares if we're the last ones that they're waiting on, but I just assume not be. But I understand the sentiment, Councilor Lehman.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
And did you want to make a motion?
I do. I would like to amend the motion to remove the emergency clause.
Okay. And do I have a second? I'm sorry, do I have a second? In case I was talking to something. Councilor, so we had a motion made by Councilor Lehman and second by Councilor Bisco. Any further discussion? Councilor Lowe?
So if I get this correctly, if we remove the emergency clause, then you're in a position that you can vote yay, in which case it would go, if everybody else votes yay, it would go into effect 30 days from now. If we don't remove it, you would vote no, which means it would have to come back to us in what, 30 plus days?
14 days.
It would come back at the second meeting of April. So we would look at it April 25th.
Yep, with another reading, the whole thing. So it sounds like,
Then it would be effective 30 days after that. So it'd be effective May 26th.
so practically speaking, it seems that if we go this route, this is the quickest way to get to Dodge, or wherever.
Yeah. And I'll just mention that generally I'm not in favor of just trying to slow progress and slow down the process. I'm just generally think that's a poor, I just think that's poor form generally if we know that we're going to pass it eventually. So for that reason, I'll vote no on the this particular motion. But anyway, all in favor of amending the motion, or amending the ordinance to remove the emergency clause, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay, and all opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. So motion carries 5-2 with Councilor Causey and myself voting no.
Magnificent wins.
And so now we have, can I get a motion? Oh wait, now we just do a roll call vote?
Just a roll call.
You might ask if
Unless
there's
there's any other amendments.
Sure. Councilor Bisco?
I'm gonna go back to my comments from last meeting, which were, I was unable to find a motion or a decision made by the Council or Public Works Committee that made the decision about the location of the bioswale. I think that goes to public comment and public involvement, especially when we're looking at the Marys River Park. And I'm concerned that I was just flat out told no, that city staff wouldn't facilitate locating that. I've already spent a significant amount of time trying to find it. I don't think a motion should be difficult to find in our records. And if we can't provide that, then I have a question about when did that decision get made?
Okay.
And that's my concern about not the other two necessarily, easement requests here, but in particular the bioswale easement request.
And if I am correct, maybe it was just in January this year that the council voted to move forward with the bioswale in the current form.
So I'm talking about the decision to locate it, not to move forward with it.
Right.
And
And I don't
there
think
were
that was-
other alternatives that I am unable to find where that discussion took place involving the council and the public. So
Sure. That's
I'm just
fine.
asking for the direction of where that is. I'd like to review it before making a decision.
Chris?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, I referred you back to the presentation that was put forward by Murray Smith that the SAM put forward. In that presentation, I think it's the second or third slide, he explains the process of elimination that went through looking at other sites, why some sites were considered and removed and why other sites were submitted and followed up on. And by the end of, I think, the third or fourth slide, the decision is an engineering level decision that this is the location that the bioswale has to go for all of the reasons stated previously. And so there was no decision by the city council or the public works director or the city manager. The decision was by the city engineer saying who we've contracted with to say, this is where the bioswale needs to go. Here's the least amount of impact that we can put based on the parameters we have. And that was explained in the presentation. And following the presentation, the city council gave direction to proceed with that location, which is why I said I wasn't going to do a lot more digging. It wasn't not trying to be helpful. It was the decision was made by the council in December to move forward with that location.
So my request then would be, my understanding was that there were other options that could have been concerned. This might have been the fastest track to get it done. But considering that it's in the public park area and we're talking about removing 94 to 97 trees, of which 30 are mature trees, given the fact that that particular slide presentation was under a motion of limited debate, so there was limited opportunity to ask questions. It seems like the council should have been presented options with recommendations by the engineers, and that process apparently didn't take place.
The council was presented with an option and the council voted to approve that option.
Yeah, so the council already made the
There were
decision.
other options that could have been presented. So we heard about the bioswale at a minimum of 9 months after some of the records that showed up being involved with the city. It seems like a process, again, I'm going to reiterate, involving the park and removing that distance of a natural bioswale area. There are questions about the process of it beyond just the ODOT piece of it. So it involves also Department of State Lands, Army Corps of Engineers. It involves our floodplains. There are questions about that. Those are discussions that feel like they should have come before the council before an 11th hour decision was made. And this is the only option you have, because we do in fact have other options.
So I'm going to make a point of order that the council already made a decision on this point.
You're not
And so-
acknowledging what I'm saying.
I hear you
So I
perfectly
know
well.
we made a decision, but we made a decision after the decision was already made.
That is not true. Actually, they presented,
They didn't give us options. The decision was already made.
they told us what was the best option that they decided based on their expertise. Council made a decision. So you were part of that you were part of that vote. You
Yes,
may
and I
have voted no,
for the same reason, because.
which is perfectly acceptable, but the council did make a decision that we are not going to revisit tonight.
Yep. But please acknowledge what I'm saying. which
I
is not
acknowledge what you're saying. So thank you for your thoughts. Councilor Lowe?
I don't have perfect memory by any means, but in my mind, I'm thinking that the discussion that Murray Smith brought did touch on why this area was the best one to focus on for the bioswale. I don't recall specifically, but I do remember that the way that the water flowed and everything else, that this location was the one. So I do remember that there was discussion about, but that's my point of view.
So can I just add one further comment then to that? So Murray Smith is also the engineering firm that's subcontracted to West Tech. They're the same engineering firm that has in their documents a 2.0 million gallon water treatment plant when it's in fact 1.5 million gallon. At the same presentation, we were told that the water treatment reservoir would be 15 to 20 feet above ground when in fact it's 32.6 feet above ground. The maps suggest that it's 80 feet when in fact it's 100 foot. If you go back to our public works part, what is it? It's the water master plan. So we have been given limited information. I understand that they gave us what was their recommendation, but can any of you tell us what the other options were? I don't think any of us can, because we weren't given those options to consider. And I do feel that's the responsibility of us in this place to be given those options, not the final decision. And Murray Smith, admittedly, even this evening, didn't take into consideration all of the easements that would be required by ODOT to do this work. So I'm asking for the fact that we did not, given the fact that we were not given information to consider as a council and evaluate, it seems like we jumped ahead of the gun and we're being asked to approve a decision that was made without our input.
Do you have a motion that you'd like to make?
Nope, I'm just making a comment.
Great, thank you. Any further comments or questions or comments? Councilor Andrade?
I would like to support everything that Councilor Bisco said. Yes, they, excuse me. Yes, they presented different options, but I am under the impression there was at least one that it was just cost prohibitive, but who's to make that decision that it's cost prohibitive? And so for that reason, had we been told of this bioswale earlier and been given these options, then who knows what would have happened. So I'll be voting no. But I do have a question. What's the irrigation that is being put into the front of City Hall?
So irrigation for, I believe, for the flower baskets and the flower, I think it's specifically for the flower baskets along there.
So does that mean that we're not, I guess we weren't presented with that as well? Like, is that something that the people who pay for who sponsor those baskets are paying for, or like each year instead? Or is there something that I'm missing? Only because we're water limited, I have concerns about an irrigation system.
I would argue that the irrigation system is much more water efficient than pouring 5 gallons of water on it each day. But
is that what they would do?
Yeah, that's what they do.
That's what we do now. But I want to just step back just a little bit. I'll try to be a little bit careful here because I don't want to say anything I shouldn't, I guess. But there are a lot of aspects to a project that's this size that we hire professionals to come and do for us. And we hire engineers that are experienced at this. And I'm not saying that anybody in this room isn't as proficient an engineer as Murray Smith, but I'm saying there's a reason that a city like Philomath hires a company like Murray Smith to come and do the engineering for this project, because some of these things aren't policy decisions. Some of these things are, this is what needs to be done decisions that has to get done. And I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but I could give you a list, literally probably 10 pages long, of all the decisions that Murray Smith has had to make on our behalf that are engineering decisions that we could have policy discussions about, and we could invite the public to come, and we could have surveys, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but we could talk a whole lot about a whole bunch of options, and we would never get this project done. Or we can trust that Murray Smith is going to do their work, they're going to make their best recommendations, and we're going to move forward with the project. And the things that we can control that are really policy, like what are the benches going to look like? What are the streetlights going to look like? You know, the aesthetic types of things. Those are things that we've gone up and beyond to make efforts to reach out to the public and make sure that we've got input on those things that we can control. But I feel like a couple of times tonight already and months in the past, we're diving into areas that really aren't a matter of policy and what would we prefer. And it's really a matter of what are the engineers telling us needs to be done and be considered. Now, where is that line on every single one of these items? Again, you're talking about an immense amount of work even to decipher where that area is. I can just say part of my job as the city manager is to keep in touch with the engineer and to work with the engineer and to help determine what things I feel are policy type decisions, like the look and the facade and the theme, and what types of things are engineering type compromises that the city's going to have to make. If we're going to have a streetscape project and we're going to touch anything on the highway, we have to treat that water. And the engineer did a thorough analysis and they presented that analysis to the council, what would need to be done to make that happen. The irrigation needs to go in. Do we have to have irrigation? We don't. The city made a decision years ago to put irrigation in this project. We evaluated pros and cons. If the irrigations go in, there's a place that has to go. There's not a lot of options. This isn't a policy decision at some point. There's a place that the irrigation needs to go. We need to put the irrigation there. If we don't want to put the irrigation there, we could do something else. We can take a survey. We can talk to all the residents. But at the end of the day, we need to make a decision or this project will never get done. And I'm not saying that's what's causing delays, but if we start second guessing all of the decisions that the engineer and or I and or ODOT has made we won't ever get to this project. We won't get to a starting line. And I'm concerned about that because right now we're regurgitating a lot of decisions that were made weeks and months and years ago that now that we're ready to go, we're double guessing and second guessing them.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. And Counselor Bisco.
So I just have a question. I don't think that deciding on benches and decorations for the street is quite the same level of responsibility for the council as deciding whether or not we carve out the western end of our Marys River Park. That was supposed to be in theory protected from exactly these types of incursions. My question to you, Chris, is were you involved and were you aware of the other alternatives that were provided instead of that bioswale location that was decided before it came to the council? Because I don't think Murray Smith made that decision in a vacuum.
I had ongoing conversations with Murray Smith.
And would it have been difficult
Let him finish
then?
his statement, please.
I had ongoing conversations with Murray Smith and Public Works about different options to consider. And some of the decisions, like the reference to financially constrained, yes, we looked at other options and looking at that and knowing what our budget was, I said, we are not going to be able to afford to do that. And Murray Smith agreed, with your budget, you're never going to be able to afford to do this requirement. And so we have to do something else. And so, yes, there were several decisions that I and Murray Smith made that eliminated some of the other options because they were not feasible.
And how difficult would it have been to bring that to the council for consideration in making those decisions? Because a budget consideration where there are grants potentially that could be afforded or budgets that can be adjusted is in fact the responsibility of the council.
One moment before you answer that, Chris. I think that, Chris uses professional judgment to make a decision on what things are brought to the council sometimes. This is a decision that he felt comfortable with. Personally, I feel very comfortable with the fact that the engineer recommended this as the most viable option and that Chris said, I agree.
Do you know about the other alternatives?
I don't think I need to know about the other
That's not what
alternatives,
I
and I am
asked,
completely okay with that because I trust the engineers to make decisions that I cannot make because I don't have the expertise.
But that's not
Even
what
though I have a
asked.
degree in
So we
civil
don't-
engineering.
We do not have
In fact,
degrees in finance.
I'm sorry, you're out of order. I'm speaking, and I don't interrupt you like that unless I'm calling you a point of order,
Right.
and you don't have that ability. So what I'm saying is that I have a PhD in civil engineering, and I still do not believe that I have the qualifications to think that I have the background to state that our professional engineer who's certified in engineering is making a wrong decision.
But our certified engineer doesn't live here, and all I was asking for is why was the council not at least involved in the process at all, nor was the Public Works Committee, which is the responsibility of the Public Works Committee. Please don't interrupt me.
I didn't.
Okay, and with that, we're not experts in finance, we're not experts in engineering, we're not experts in a lot of areas, but we do have decisions come before the council so we can make the best decisions collectively on behalf of the community. This is a major incursion into the Marys River Park. It was completely unexpected, unknown, brought before the council in November or December under a motion to limit debate so that questions could not be asked except within this little box of motion to limit debate. And that's why I'm asking the question. I think it's a decision that should have at least been allowed to come before the council. It easily could have been said, you know what, no worries, let's just move on next.
Okay.
And because it's not the only decision like this, as in the location of the water treatment plant as well, the reservoir, excuse me, as in who removed the document from the park master plan, those are questions that are now being asked by the community, and that is our job to represent those questions.
Okay. And yeah, if you have a motion you'd like to make to ask that these kind of decisions be made by a council, I'd welcome that motion because we could vote on it and then we could cease having these kinds of
I'm not sure how you would
conversations.
ever know which decisions were being made because we're not being asked.
And nor should we in a lot of those cases. But I'm sorry, Councilor Causey, you had a question or comment?
I just had a couple of comments. First, I recognize that the engineers are licensed professionals. I trust the decision that they made. I'm sure they're aware that the public is very sensitive to the removal of trees. I'm also confident that those trees, that other trees will be replanted elsewhere. No, they won't be mature trees, but other trees will be planted. And I also wanted to note with respect to the motion to limit debate made, I had no sense whatsoever that anyone felt constrained by that motion. And I believe I will defer to Mr. Brewer, but I believe there can be a motion made to dispense with the motion to limit debate.
That's correct.
And so we have sorry, Councilor Andrade.
Yeah, I agree with everything Councilor Bisco said. First of all, I have no problem with the irrigation system. It was just a question. And, curiosity because of water issues. I think that we need to be more cognizant, like the council needs to be more, the city needs to be more cognizant of any sort of decision that involves the natural environment, because obviously it's something Philomath cares about. I mean, we're a timber town, like we care. And I think that, that moving forward, that the council and community need to be at least told that this is happening. And you can tell us your concerns, and here's why or why not we can change it based on your concerns.
Thank you. With that, we have can we go ahead and do a roll call vote on the ordinance as amended?
And this is on ordinance 863 as amended by removing the emergency clause.
Correct.
Andrade?
So this, could you again, that's,
No.
One moment, Councilor Andrade. Councilor Bisco has a question.
so this is the vote to remove the emergency
Well,
clause?
that was already.
No, that was
Okay, then I misheard you because that's what I thought you just said.
What I said was that this is ordinance 863 with the amendment that removes the emergency clause. Councilor Andrade?
No.
Councilor Bisco?
No,
Councilor Causey?
Yes,
Councilor Lehman?
Yes.
Councilor Lowe?
Yes.
Councilor Nielsen?
Yes.
Mayor Jones?
Yes. And so we will see that come back to us at the next council meeting?
On the 25th.
Yep, the 25th. Okay. With that, in record time, it's 8:15, 8:17, we are at council reports and then followed by staff reports. Any councilor have a council report they'd like to make? Councilor Causey?
I would just like to acknowledge our senior first citizen. Congratulate Councilor Lowe and the other individuals from our city who were recognized, particularly our former mayor and Maeve Dempsey and the others. I don't recall them yet.
And I believe that there was a standing ovation, if I remember correctly.
There was a
There
standing
maybe
ovation.
there might have been a bunch of embarrassment by that person. Who was that? Can you, maybe the news reporter can remind us of who that was?
My wife probably started the standing ovation.
Yes. Congratulations to all the winners. It was a great event. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Causey.
Councilor Lowe.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of things. The first one, I'm gonna channel my inner Doug.
I was just gonna do that too.
Well, I could go to my second one and let you do that.
It's fine, either way.
Yeah, the bus ridership report. Couldn't help but notice that the results for this year are significantly higher than they've been in a long time, and we're getting fairly closer to where we were all-time 13, 14. So that's really very amazing. And is that because of the gas prices going up? Do we have a feel for what that's all about, Chris?
I would, in talking to Tim, I think I'd put it more on the apartments that have come in, and now with enrollment at OSU back in person more, I think you've got more students in Philomath that are going to OSU is, I think, the more, where we're seeing the numbers coming in. And gas prices are up too. I'm sure that's contributing as well. So I don't want to dismiss that, but I think the biggest thing is new apartments in town with bus stops right out in front that make it really convenient for students to hop on and get to campus.
Have we had any feedback about, because we rerouted the buses and we redid the schedule or something a while back. Have we had any feedback about how that's been received by people other than the ridership?
We have, so I won't try to break this down in front of us, but we have looked at the different stops and we've looked at pickups because they do track when people get on and get off. But we are seeing good numbers for the apartments that have come in since we rerouted that. So much happened. I mean, there's not like one change that happened. You had a nice control to put it up against, right? There were so many things changed between going fareless, changing the route, adding routes midday, adding the apartments. So there were a lot of changes kind of happen all at once. So it's really hard to say what caused it. But overall, we're just glad to see the bus getting more use for sure, and glad that that's a resource for people to be able to use.
And I was going to mention that the spring recycling event, April 16th, Saturday from 9 to 2. It's your opportunity to get rid of a lot of the extra stuff that you may not want sitting around your house. Yes, so I'm excited about that. Councilor Lowe?
Yeah, I had a second thing. So we also, in our packet, have the City of Philomath current planning and building case files update. And I appreciate seeing that and getting that. Is that going to be a regular feature for us?
I think that can become a regular thing, absolutely.
Yeah, that was really cool. The one I wanted to comment on is number 9, talking about Mill Pond Crossing and the city having a meeting with Levi Miller over the lot line issue that the subdivision has. And this is an issue I brought up at our last council meeting about what citizens I talked to had talked about frustrations with things that were going on at the development. And so I was actually at this meeting. I was asked to be there because of the concerns I had raised at the council meeting. So, and it was pleased to see that Mr. Miller and the residents that were there were able to resolve their concern about those lot lines, come to an agreement. It was a matter of compensation as well as basically signing off on it. So I think that it's a good step forward. There's still issues that the residents are dealing with there. And I think it's really important that we counselors hear from the residents that they still have issues, but I know the city manager is very committed to resolving a lot of these issues that they have as much as we can. I mean, once the approvals and everything are done and the citizens have bought their houses, the city doesn't have a lot of specific leverage in there. But to the extent that we do, and just the bully pulpit, I guess, big stick kind of thing, whatever it is, Chris is working with Levi to make sure that he does follow through on his commitments. And it seems that communication is one of Mr. Levi, Mr. Miller's things he needs to work on. I think he acknowledges that, but hopefully he'll be doing that. So I think it's important that we recognize the legitimate issues that the citizens have there and bring those up when we have to.
Thank you.
Can I mention one?
Please do.
I was very encouraged that another application for the Woodlands subdivision for the Habitat for Humanity, that we're progressing towards that, finishing that subdivision. I pass by that street quite often, and it's just really hope building for our community to see that Habitat for Humanity having success and going forward at a pretty good clip, I would say, with the homes in this time of economic stress and building material costs and such, that Habitat for Humanity is still being very successful in working with us to make these homes affordable for new citizens and families in our community. I'm very encouraged by that, so thank you for.
Yeah, I just drove by one, I took off work just a little bit early and went by a drive-by. They've requested occupancy for their next one. So we'll have a new family in Philomath here within the next week or so. It looks good. It looks like they've just planted the seed, but they've got soil down and a new tree in the yard, and it's got the nice steps, and it's just a great looking house. And even there, the neighbor next door that's been there already has got a couple kids in the backyard, and you can see a couple kids playing back there, and you just kind of just shut your eyes and listen. You could just hear the buzz of that little neighborhood already. It was kind of fun.
Yes.
So no, those are great projects, and we're happy to partner with them on that as much as we can. And I should say partner. They do all the work, but I'm happy that they continue to come to Philomath to want to build houses. That's great.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports? Councilor Andrade?
I would like to make motions, but if anyone else has things that aren't motions, you can go ahead and go first.
Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, so in part of my role, I'm the liaison to Campo, which is the Corvallis Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, which mostly deals with transportation issues. And then through that, on the Cascade West Area Committee on Transportation, which then leads into a statewide. And then I'm also a member of the League of Oregon Cities Transportation and Legislation Committees. Anyway, everyone seems to be having problems with railroads. Any projects that want to occur within the right-of-way of the railroads. And mostly it's been around trails, but also at-grade crossings, things like that. And I'm recalling that in our plans, in our strategic plan and in our Parks Master plans, we have trails that are theoretically going along the railroad tracks or crossing the railroad tracks. And I'm just wondering, is that pie in the sky stuff, or have we even talked to the railroads about doing that? Or did we just kind of like, hey, there's already kind of a natural path, we should turn that into a trail, and just want to get a better feel for that, because I think this might be a much bigger apple that we're biting into than we think.
I can respond in part. I'll just say that the one trail that comes to my mind along I think the north side of the railroad, kind of west of 13th Street, isn't one that was in the Park Master Plan beforehand. So that's a new trail that the consultant thought would be a good spot to put one and feasible. We've not looked at it much more than that, if at all, any more than that. So it's kind of pie in the sky at this point. Like, there's a good spot, two-dimensionally, not knowing the players involved.
Sure.
I don't know that it's real high on the priority list right now as far as looking at the capital project list. But no, definitely more work to be done. So I appreciate I did get a phone call, not to switch gears too much. I did get a phone call late last week about the crossing at 19th Street, that railroad crossing. It's pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be doing some outreach to the county to have them, the county jurisdiction at that point, and see if they can reach out to the railroad and see if we can make some improvements there, because it's pretty rough.
While railroads are a challenge to deal with, Philomath, like a few other small cities in Oregon, has some places where the right-of-way that the track is within does not belong to the railroad. It belongs to the city.
Nice.
And that gives some extra leverage when you can get the railroad to talk to you. And it is an amazing abyss of operators, owners, and sub-owners, and they change who at what department in what state actually has authority for that kind of thing. It's an amazing kind of shuffle, but it does give some leverage that not every city has, and Philomath has that advantage.
Nice.
And
that's
that's
good.
something that can be traded for things like trails and crossings in places that you do want them. It's also a surprise to them when they've asked us to pay for a permit on our own property.
Right. That was one thing in particular. They were asking for $30,000 a year to maintain a trail that would go alongside of a road which already goes under a trestle. But they can, so they do.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Any other council reports? Okay, and Council Andrade?
Thank you. As I wrote in my email to council and staff a couple days ago, I didn't realize that I had voted to return to in-person meetings. So there are several reasons as to why, including not being able to, having not processed or heard a certain phrase that is vital to the meaning of the motion. And so I would like to move for the council to reconsider the March 14th, 2022 vote to return to in-person meetings.
Okay, and so there was a motion. Second? Okay, seeing none, motion dies.
Can I second the motion,
yeah.
actually, and can we acknowledge what Councilor Andrade provided in the packet in that space? Or
Mm.
I don't think it made it into the packet, right? It was after the packet.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get it there on time because
Right.
life. Thank you, Councilor Bisco.
So one moment.
Yeah,
Council Andrade, 1 moment, please.
Point of information, Councilor Bisco, were you referring to the information from Hannah Davis? Is that what you were?
I'm not seeing it right now this moment. I just know that we've at least received it, if it's not here.
Yeah, it's in the second.
And the profile.
Yeah, should be in there.
Yeah, there's COVID-related information in the packet, but not information about this proposed motion.
yeah.
So 1 moment. So we have a motion made by Council Andrade and seconded by Councilor Bisco. And so would you like to speak to that, Council Andrade?
Yes. As I said, I don't know what happened. This is the second time where I have had a misvote. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people didn't know, like, watching that the same thing. Sorry, 1 moment, I took notes. Yeah, for one thing, I personally think we should, that it's safer to remain in virtual meetings. COVID is still dangerous, it's still harmful, and I included that Twitter thread that I had spoken about before with by the long COVID researcher. And it doesn't even matter if you have a small case versus mild case versus a asymptomatic case. You're still going to have issues for the rest of your life, whether you realize it in the moment or not. And I think that I've been surprised actually at how well the video and audio has been tonight, because we have had hybrid meetings before, and they were not good. But I'm afraid that we don't have enough of the proper technology to make people feel to be able to have an inclusive meeting environment for those who cannot or prefer not to go into City Hall.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councilor Bisco?
So my reason for seconding this request for to revote at least allows Councilor Andrade the opportunity to change her vote.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of reconsidering the vote to return, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
Nay. So motion fails 2-5.
I have another motion I would like to make.
Okay.
Let me find it. As I stated in my email and just now,
And make the motion, then we can have you speak to it after.
I move that staff, effective as soon as possible, digitally display each motion for all to see at the time of each vote.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second? So motion made by Councilor Andrade and seconded by Councilor Bisco. Councilor Andrade, can you speak to that motion?
As I stated previously, there have been times where I have missed hearing an important phrase or like haven't processed something and didn't realize it until later. And this is standard practice for a lot of spaces, and it doesn't seem like it would be much like extra time to just have it written up on the computer, like, you know, Zoom sharing, and have that also appear to whoever's in the room. I mean, they have to write down the motions anyway. And it decreases the time needed for council members to disentangle motions and amendments on the table if we're calling the question and all of these things. And it's more accessible not only to me, but other council members, as I stated, but also the community if they're.
Okay.
I guess it just makes more sense to do that than like, okay, example. In I don't know, there was a meeting in which there have been meetings in which the people here have been forgotten about digitally and being wow, my words today. There have been presentations in which the presenter has pointed to things on the screen that whoever's watching here, Zoom, streaming, were unable to see. There was only so much that we could like understand of where exactly they were pointing. And that is the same for, I don't know, that it's analogous for me, at least, with regards to having the motions written up there. It's because you're displaying something that isn't seen to people on Zoom there. I don't know if that made sense.
Okay, we have some follow-up questions. Councilor Causey.
I just wanted to agree that there certainly have been meetings when we've had motions, amendments, further amendments, discussions, confusion. But I don't believe it's necessary to write out the motion every time. Certainly, if it's confusing, if it's unclear, we could have it written out and screen shared. But unless there is a way technologically, and I know you're probably not aware of this, Councilor Gotti, but all of the spoken words tonight are appearing below your image.
Oh,
So now I don't know if there's a way to put the motion somewhere on the screen as like a header or another footer or whatever. But I'm not sure if it's a simple motion, and we're all clear about what it is. I'm not sure it needs to be digitized every time. That's the only point I would make.
Thank you. And Councilor Bisco, you had your hand up previously. Did you?
I did, yes.
Okay,
but
go ahead.
I'll let Councilor Lehman, it looks like he has a response to that comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if asking the city recorder to put that in the chat, for example, for Zoom, if that would be adequate to.
We don't use chats, and we're not using Zoom.
Then no.
Because we disabled the chat, right? Like we're not able to chat. Councilor Bisco.
So bouncing really off of that question, which is there a way that we could do this? Because I think that different people learn and engage differently in communication styles. So audibly, some of us lean heavier into that space. Visually, I think there's an asset, and certainly we've stumbled over many motions and then amendments to motions and several layers deep sometimes. I know for a fact I have made votes that were incorrect, that weren't crucial necessarily, but would have rather had them corrected, but it's quite a process to correct them. So giving us that extra clarification addresses not only accessibility issues, but public accessibility issues, council accessibility issues, learning styles or preference of communications, and might actually prevent misvotes from happening. So I would certainly support it if there's an option or a way that we could do that.
I know we can always share a screen, right? If we have it on the camera. I don't think it's an issue of technology limitations. I think that there are a lot of simple votes that we don't need to put in a motion form on the screen. I recognize that Chris replied to Councilor Andrade's email saying that it's in our council rules that any councilor at any time can request that they be able to see the motion in writing. So that is already in our council rules.
yes,
I'm sorry, I'm talking.
I didn't realize you were going to continue.
That's fine. So, yeah, so I think that it makes a lot of sense. I really think it makes a lot of sense for us to realize that we can make that request. And we have plenty of times where the motion has been complicated, right, and amended. And in those cases, I think it's a great idea that we make that request. Can we see it in writing? Can we share it on the screen, or can we get it printed out in front of us? In that same vein, I think it's incredibly helpful when the council comes to a meeting or submits a motion in writing a week in advance and gets that into the council packet, right? So we can all see it. Same reason. But for that reason, I don't want to vote that I'm not going to vote yes on this particular thing, but we should put every motion in writing. I think passing the consent agenda, we don't need to make those kinds of simple motions in writing. But I think that it's important that we know that we can do that. And when there is something that we have a question about, we make that request, and that by default, it will then happen.
Mayor Jones,
Councilor Bisco.
She might.
Sorry, Councilor Bisco.
No, you can go ahead first.
Councilor Andrade, come on, please. Councilor Bisco.
So I'm just curious if I would like to ask Ruth if you have an opinion about how this might work. It seems to me that it might work if it was consistent every time.
I do have an opinion about it. When I'm taking minutes, many times I'm not taking minutes in full word form. So, and frequently, what we have is motions that are, sometimes we have motions that are moving part. They're being developed, how do I put this? In the brain of the motion giver at the time that they're saying the motion, and words move around a little bit, ideas get framed, and I'm trying to record the words I'm hearing as fast as I can, and I'm not writing them in English. I'm writing them as quickly as I can, partial words. For me to screen share that isn't going to work well. As I listen and I take minutes, then asking me to double up as an IT technology person and turn around and rekey it in or whatever in order to get it into a digital format that displays on the Zoom is going to slow your meetings down. You're going to be sitting and waiting for me to do this. And I'm just trying to be honest about this.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Job. Right now I'm doing a second job over here. I'm, watching this screen over here at the same time. Now we're going to add another layer into the equation is, starting to push the envelope of what I can do.
Yeah, Chris?
I think Ruth has a lot more capacity than what she gives herself credit for. That said, I think what's been spoken is good. I don't get to vote on this, but I think the mayor makes a good point. There's some motions that to require that we stop, freeze, type it out, submit it is going to waste some time. Granted, some of these, as I said in the email earlier, if it's in the agenda item summary already, it's already typed out. So if it's a matter of doing a screenshot to that agenda item summary and having it written there, it's not going to take a lot of time, but I don't know who's going to do that. Again, I have a hard time tracking as well. I'm making eye contact. I'm trying to do this. If I'm on my machine trying to pull that up, it is more difficult. It is more difficult to do the hybrid when you're literally doing both at the same time, right? I'm doing in person and I'm online at the same time, which is what Ruth's trying to explain is she's here and she's at home. She's not just at home or not just in the office. So in the short of it, I think we can make some of it work, but at the end of the day, I think it'd be a recess. Like I'd like to see that motion. Can we take a 5-minute recess so we can get it typed up and bring it back and have it seen so we can do that? That's what it will take. It's not going to be on the fly. Yep, here it is. It's ready to go. If there's one that's more complicated, you want to see it typed up, we'll take a 5-minute recess. We can get it typed up and we can get it on the screen. We have the technology to do that. Ruth's comment is she's not typing as you go, saying what you're saying as you go. We'll have to go back. We may have to stop the recording, go back and listen to the recording. That's the process we do in the minutes. Even before we're doing hybrid meetings, that's why we record the minutes and have the audio, is so that we can go back and re-listen to it. I say Ruth can go back and listen to it and she can get the wording of those motions just right. Sometimes you gotta listen to it 2 or 3 times to get the words just right or more. So I don't want to say no to the ask. I appreciate the ask, Councilor Andrade. I don't think it's necessary every single time. Staff can make this work, but it's just going to mean a little bit more time in your meetings for those minutes or those motions that you do want to see typed out and written in front of you. But we can do it. We have the technology to do it.
Thank you.
I understand, Ruth. Thank you for clarifying that information. And I'm well aware you can ask for motions to be written out, and that, it's better to send in a motion a week in advance. It's just, anyway.
Thank you. And
There are ways to do it. There are group spaces where people have their computers, their lab, and they type it out and send it. And it just appears to everyone in yeah, I just would appreciate some imagination.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nielsen.
I think being cognizant of the complexity of some motions that are made, is there a need at times for it to be able to be, reinforced visually? Absolutely. But we have that currently in our council rules. And I do think that some motions are simple enough or clearly enough or also printed clearly enough that we can not make a blanket statement that each motion be visually typed for all to see. So because there are important things to accomplish, and I'm not saying the simpler motions are not important, but the simpler motions are easier to do without having that visual confirmation. So I feel pretty comfortable with the way things are currently. If we are mindful of those complexities and ask for clarification, and we have done that in the past, and maybe we'll be a little more assertive in doing that in the future.
Yeah, it's good to be reminded that we can, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Councilor Visco.
So I just want to make it a point here that we do not make assumptions, and I feel like some of that is happening. If the request has been made, I think we need to honor that request with regards to ability and access, and not just assume that just because we all can see or we all work in one particular fashion that we don't need to meet that request. I understand it might take longer, but we've just spent 10 minutes talking about it. And if we can find a way to do this, I think we should look at a way to do this. It's not just for this group, it's for everybody else participating. And I know that ability is not always the easiest thing to navigate. So I feel like we're skirting over the top of potential ability issues.
Thank you. And Councilor Andrade.
Thank you, Councilor Bisco. I appreciate that. I also would like to point out, which I said in my email, I didn't know that I didn't hear something. I didn't know that I didn't process something. So how am I supposed to ask for a clarification? And if I would remember correctly, in Chris's email, he said something about it being the same motion as what was in the packet, but with an amendment. So, yeah, that's my point is, I don't know. It does not feel inclusionary to not have, or inclusive, that's the word. It does not feel inclusive to not have those motions available, whether it's typed out by staff or typed out by the person making the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bisco.
I'm wondering if we can table this vote and come back with some options to consider that might provide this accessibility.
So you want to make a motion to table? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'd like to make a motion to table this previous motion
Until
we can bring back some options. Maybe Councilor Andrade, you can provide some options, and maybe staff or Ruth maybe have some recommendations of ways that we might be able to accomplish this. But acknowledging the ability and accessibility of our motions and decision-making, I think is important.
So we have a motion to table. Do I have a second? So motion to table by Councilor Bisco and seconded by Councilor Lehman. Any further discussion on that? Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to come with a specific proposal and not make it apply to everything, but then maybe also to include some technological ways that it can be accomplished so that we're not putting a burden that we don't all acknowledge and recognize on staff.
And so we're going to ask staff to come up with a recommendation for what technological solutions they could be for every motion to be in writing beyond what's actually in the packet. Or are we trying to figure out why we would do what was in the packet and then put them on screen as well. But
I'm just
So-
asking for options. I'm not saying they need to come up with a solution, but just maybe they know some technology that we do not.
Council Andrade?
Yeah, like to Councilor Bisco's and Layman's point, we don't know what kinds of programs are out there, but staff surely does. I bet they're professionals and, you know what's the latest tech and such. If there's something out there, like there has to be, from what I understand, I think there's like whiteboards or something like that. There are ways, like whiteboard, like as part of an app. And as for the motions that are already in the packet, they can be written out already and then just highlighted when we're on that motion and like, yes, this is exactly what we're doing, or, add in the amendment as it's amended. I don't think there's all that much of an extra ask in that.
And I'll just speak to this real quick. I think that we should vote on this amendment this evening, or this motion this evening. So I'm going to vote not to table it. I feel like we have information from staff. We know that doing this as a blanket statement is going to take a lot more time in every meeting. And I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it would add any value or much value to our procedure as it is. So I'll vote no to table this, but I think we should just vote on it this evening. So Councilor Bisco, and then I'm going to call a question. We're going to vote on this to table.
So I just want to put this in perspective and not stating that this is anyone in this space, but to vote from a position of ability and understanding and access against somebody who's standing at that door who maybe can't make it in that door is in fact discrimination based on ability. And I think to blanketly assume that we don't have options ahead of time is quite a statement.
Thank you. And so with that, all in favor of tabling the motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay, and all opposed to tabling the motion, please raise your hand and say nay. So motion is tabled 4-3. And so we should give some specific direction to the staff. Do you feel like you have sufficient direction on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So we feel like we have direction. Perfect. With that, we should have a staff report. Maybe.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. I know we're getting to 9 o'clock, which doesn't seem late for us, but it is a little late for us. So I just want to touch on maybe two primary areas. The first being some of the work, economic development wise, the city's been involved in. Some of this goes back a little ways, but again, I don't get to update you as often sometimes as I would like to or need to. The Great Eight, then termed Mid-Valley Partnership, MVP, is doing some rebranding and it's now REAL. So if you see that term REAL, Rural Economic Alliance, REAL is the rural Lynn and Benton counties that originally got the grant from Business Oregon with Rural Opportunities Initiative to partner with Oregon Rain and hire our consultant to come through and work with entrepreneurs in our area and help develop this entrepreneur ecosystem. It's continued to evolve and to develop, and so REAL has now rebranded and shifted its focus to not only do entrepreneurship with RAIN, but to also look at other areas of economic development where we can partner and collaborate and we can have some added benefits. One of the things that we did with some money that was received was to provide these great videos, and as soon as I get the link, I'll share those out if I haven't already. They did these great promotional videos for each of the small cities that in Philomath, they highlighted 2 businesses specifically. They got this mug in front of the camera, which was really unfortunate, and just talked about economic development in Philomath, doing business in Philomath, the benefits of Philomath, similar for Sweet Home, similar for Millersburg, and down the line. So really nice videos, shorts. that were done as a cool project that we want to start sharing and pushing that message out there. That group has also actively participated with Corvallis-Benton County Economic Development for some of the grant money that the county put out there, some of the ARPA funds. The county requested that Corvallis-Benton County Economic Development reach out to the other economic development practitioners, organizations in the area and submit a common proposal, kind of rather than having everybody fighting for the funding for economic development. They wanted a one proposal. And so we partnered with them, and some of the money that we asked for would help fund a RARE intern to serve as kind of an acting director for this RARE group. And so rather than just the city managers meeting once a month, pulling our heads, trying to full resources, we would actually have a RARE intern that would come in full time and work on that day to day, pulling together an active website that would have resources, some resource mapping, information about RARE, information about each of our communities, economic development opportunities, real estate, all those types of things would be there to really be a point of a go-to place for business owners and entrepreneurs for our region, specifically looking at rural Benton County, more specifically looking at Philomath. So all of that work is underway. We don't know if we'll get the grant. We're supposed to know, I think, middle of this month or so. Benton County is supposed to release what gets funded, but feel like our chances are pretty good since we did partner and since, we kind of went in that together. The other part of that ask was for some of those economic developments to go specifically to rural Benton County, to not just go to Corvallis, but that some of those would be siphoned off for rural Benton County. And I don't know what that dollar amount's going to look like. I'll know more, and I look forward to reporting back to the council what of those county ARPA funds come to Philomath or come this way for economic development. Still waiting on the area-wide plan report. Many of the council members were at that. Did hear from the consultant, is working diligently to kind of put the final polish on that report. Once I get that, we'll get it up on the website, and then as a council, Mayor Jones, I don't know if you feel like a work session to talk about that would be best, or just to bring it at a special meeting, but at some point that would be a good report for the council to really dive into and see what we want to do as far as our strategic plan or any funding opportunities, grant opportunities, helping kind of prioritize some of the recommendations that came out of that area-wide plan that was done. So more to come on that when that report comes through. The other group that I'm actively involved with is the Wetland Consortium group that meets at the COG level. We have recently received a grant and entered into an agreement with a consultant that's looking at publicly owned wetland mitigation banks and the feasibility of that in our region, and if they would be successful, if they would be competitive, if they could save not only some of the cities, but any kind of public good type projects, if they could save some money and streamline the process a little bit and remove some of that uncertainty that comes with property that has wetlands on it. That's what we're hoping to learn from this study. So we had a kickoff last week, and a consultant is well underway on that project now. And so I, again, look forward to reporting back to the council when we learn more on that report. And based on what's in the report, we'll see what other actions the city may or may not want to take as far as helping with that effort. I think that's it for the economic development, just some of the hot topics. But the other one I want to hit on, just some personnel issues. I sent an email out, and I'll be frank, I don't remember all of the points that I put in the email, so let me just cover very quickly. The city is currently hiring for a public works utility worker. We're also hiring for a deputy city recorder position. The deputy city recorder is really replacing the role that Ashley filled, which was a permit clerk, which started as a permit clerk and then expanding out to covering planning commission meetings and building packets and taking minutes and covering for Ruth and doing all this. So it really turned into more than just doing a permit clerk type job. And branding it as a deputy city recorder, I think, will add some more interest and will help us transition when we don't talk about the unthinkable, when Ruth one day isn't with us anymore due to retirement. we are looking at planning for what that transition may look like. And so getting a deputy city recorder now, I think will be in the city's best interest going forward. It's a part-time position now. And so if you know anybody, if you could help promote and point them Chelsea's way so we can get that position filled, because we're busy, definitely busy, and a lot of that's falling back onto Ruth again. So we want to try to get some help in there again. Speaking on Chelsea, she's just finished 6 months with the city, came and went real quick. She's done a great job of jumping in both feet. Hopefully she's turning a little bit red right now, but she's just done a phenomenal job of coming in, taking on a couple of the committees, doing after hours meetings, coming in early, and really just taking ownership of the human resources, the risk management, things that, again, when we talked about hiring this position that I preach, we just didn't have staff dedicated to really giving HR and risk management the time that it needed and the devotion that it needed. Chelsea has done that. She's done a great job. There's a lot of work to do. We're kind of at the bottom of the hill, but we're climbing the hill, which is a good feeling to have. Gives me a little bit more peace of mind each night knowing that Chelsea is on the job and working through there. One of the changes that I'm going to be making with her position, now she's completed her 6 months, we are going to change that from an hourly position to a salary position because of the after hours and all the time flexibility that position's needing. And that will benefit the city greatly.
Sorry, Chelsea.
But it also comes with a title change. So rather than assistant
In lieu of
to,
pay.
yeah, in lieu of pay, rather than assistant to city manager, it will be an assistant city manager position. She will be, put in charge when I'm not available. She's not going to oversee any department heads. That will still be on me, but she essentially will be kind of in charge when I'm not in the office. And again, the caliber of skill sets that Chelsea brings with her, I think warrants the work that we're having her do, which is much overdue. So great asset to the community, great for our office, and just can't say enough about how grateful I am to have her on board. I've told her that numerous times, but I'll say it again here publicly. Thank you, Chelsea. Keep up the good work. And then finally, I will just say, Mike Brzezinski, finance director, is doing terrific. Jumped in both feet, same thing. Can't be happier with that hire. I was working very diligently on the budget. Is excited to start talking budget with the council and the budget committee. I'm excited for some of the small tweaks that have already been made. And again, just to see him jump in and crank through things, that's a difficult position to be put in. I think any time of year with the finance department is difficult to jump into, but he's doing great, and I just want to acknowledge that as well. He's doing a good job. And last but not least, I just want to thank Ruth Post. She's taken on some added responsibilities professionally in her role as the regional director for IAMC. And she's done some more traveling and just doing a great job of staying on top of things, working around city schedule with her schedule. And I just really appreciate having Ruth to do as much as she does, and just want to acknowledge that. So thank you, Ruth, again. We have really good city staff right now. We've always had good city staff, and I just want to let them know how much they're appreciated, and hope the city realizes what a blessing we have to have good workers that really do love and care about the city and work hard for them. So that was it. Economic development, HR. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council's got about anything else in the packet or anything.
Councilor Causey?
I just wanted to acknowledge the improvement in the sound system. Councilor Andrade is right. The previous hybrid meetings were pretty horrible. And yet I think it really is wonderful.
You just gave me a chance to tee up Ruth again. Ruth did a great job, did some research, found a great product. We liked it. We tried it. We bought a second one so we can tether them together so these mics work in unison with one another so we don't get the feedback. We are working with some audiovisual professionals who are super slammed right now to get some new camera equipment that'll be a little bit better definition front and back, and we're still working on layout ideas. So we've not forgotten. I would have liked to have been there today. The mayor keeps saying October. I'd like to get there sooner, but right now everybody is upgrading their facilities right now, and so our audiovisual guys, our professionals, are very, very busy, and we're on the list. So they promised me they'll get to us, and until we know what the audio video is going to look like, it doesn't make sense to start talking about physically where things are going to go, but that will come back to the council for kind of a final, we like this or we don't like this discussion. So thank you for that acknowledgement. It is much better, and I appreciate the work that Ruth does to help make that happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't give anybody a break this evening. I was thinking that we were kind of wrapping it up a little while ago, but and Jim, you haven't had an opportunity to give a staff report in a long time.
I haven't. There is something in your packet tonight that I want to talk about just briefly, which is the tobacco retail license, and it's in your correspondence under J08. Don't want to say, it was a surprise to me that the proposed county fee for a tobacco retail license would be $560, which is, I think, 1,100% increase over what it has been. That's still less than the 2,000% increase the state would put in line. And I had some discussion with the health department staff about that seems like a very large jump at one time. And what they've said, and I think they are probably correct, is that in order to have a program that meets the minimum requirements of the new state law, it's simply going to cost that much. That they can't have the personnel that they need to do that, which is only a quarter-time position, without that size of a fee. What you'll see at maybe at your next meeting is an ordinance which will not repeal Philomath's current tobacco retail license ordinance, but will put it on hiatus. You may recall that the council authorized entering into an intergovernmental agreement so that Benton County would be doing enforcement within the city limits of Philomath. The county would like the city to simply adopt the county's ordinance. I think we're better off at this point keeping what you have in place, putting enforcement on hiatus while this goes into place. I think there's a 50-50 chance that after the next legislative session, there'll be a new set of stuff, and they'll want you to do something else at that point, and that'll continue every 2 years. So yes, you were correct, Councilor Lehman.
Thank you.
I believe that you said at the time, this is a money grab.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, are they anticipating that some of the retail establishments are going to opt not to have a license to resell tobacco products then?
Well, that is, of course, the goal. I mean, all of this is designed to discourage people from smoking. That's the health department's goal. That's the state policy. That's what tobacco settlement money that's largely used for grants to local health departments is supposed to do, is to help reduce the number of people who are smoking. And I would think it would be reasonable to assume that, yeah, it's supposed to discourage people from selling stuff too.
Thank you. City Recorder, you have any reports?
Thank you.
Chelsea?
No.
Excellent. Well, with that, I think we could adjourn. But thank you all for the evening, and yeah, it's been a good conversation. Have a good night.
Good night.
Right.